Thanks so much to all my patrons. Join now to help support the channel and help pick the books that I review. Link in the description. And I am done. Okay, so I just got done reading Deadhouse Gates. This is book 2 of Malazan, Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. And I want to give you my unedited thoughts on finishing this book, which was literally just right now. So, yeah. I loved it. Of course I did. It's one of my favorite books that I've ever read, and I'm doing a reread. So of course I loved it. And it's an easy 5 out of 5 for me. And yeah, this is a joy. This is a joy to read. I've been looking forward to it for a very long time. And honestly, it's probably the number one book in Malazan, Book of the Fallen that I was most looking forward to rereading, because I feel like my thoughts about this book, as I've reflected on it over time, have really elevated my feelings about it since I read it. And so I went into this feeling like I was going to love it so much more than the first time I read it. But honestly, and a little bit disappointing, is that I ended up liking it just about as much that I did the first time, which I loved it. It's one of the better books I've ever read, but I kind of thought I was going to read this one and be like, man, this is like, top 10. And it's not quite there. It had things that held me back. But overall, this is a special book. And it thoroughly holds up, even knowing what this whole series is about. And there were things that I loved about reading this book for the first time and feeling lost in this world and learning about this new continent and these cultures and a lot of these new characters, a lot of characters that we get to know and love and spend a lot of time with throughout this series for the first time. And you lose that on the reread, right? But knowing everything ahead of time and having this familiarity with everybody before they show up, and not feeling kind of lost, and knowing how events turn up, even books down the line from now. And so having this kind of knowledge about everything as you're going through it is a different kind of special. And so, both of these carried some very important different aspects to them that made me kind of feel like it was a similar enjoyability to me. Steven Erikson, there's a reason he's my favorite writer, and just the way that he can write anything, literally everything that I've read of his has touched me in a really special way, because he just speaks to what I'm looking for. Now, he's not for everybody. No author's for everybody, clearly. And I suspect that his writing style would turn off a great large amount of people that are looking for other things, and that's okay. And people should try to figure out what works for them. But just the way that he can write a sentence is magical. If I prepped my videos, if I kept a script, I would read you some examples. But do yourself a favor if you've never read Malazan, or if you have and just want to refresh yourself, go look at go on Goodreads and look at the top quotes for the different books that he's written, and they're all just special, and they evoke this incredible feeling out of them, and they're also unique. I mean, I do this thing often. I switch between reading this big. I have a few different e-readers that I read. I have a Kindle that's kind of medium sized. I've got this huge one that I take notes on with this pen here. I've got a cell phone sized one that weighs almost nothing that I kind of keep on me at all times, and I use the one that works best. And so to sync them up, I will look up a unique sequence of words that I know will pop up, and search through the times that showed up in the book and select the one to be able to find out quickly how to scan between them. And on all the books that I've read, I look up a sequence of words, and it shows up 10 times, and I got to find the one it is. But every time that I do it with Erikson's, it's always completely unique. Even 2 words. It feels like no 2 words ever go in the same combination with this guy, which is kind of a cool little fact about. I don't know if it's a fact, because it's anecdotal, but it shows how the depth of this guy's vocabulary, and not to the point where he's trying to impress you, but he's just has such a brilliant way of thinking. And it's shown, I think, where like even if you go read, he's active on YouTube a lot. He'll respond to comments on some people's YouTube pages, even smaller YouTubers. He'll look up videos and he'll just, give a response that he knows that kind of only they would see. And every now and then I've stumbled upon him. And you know that he's writing without a draft. He's just kind of just spitballing. And it comes off as something that like I would never be able to write in a million years if I perfected it, for hours and hours and hours. The way he can on a simple take, it's just beautiful and poetic and incredible. And to have a whole book full of that and a whole series full of that and a whole bibliography full of that, is just a joy to be able to have. It's wonderful that I found this author. And I hope that everybody can find an author that speaks to them like Erikson does to me, because it just increases your happiness with life, quite frankly. And if I ever met the guy, I would have to give him such a heartfelt thank you for opening me up to such immense happiness that he's able to give me just by writing anything. He could write about his day, and I'd probably just have the same feelings about it. But that's not what this book is about, because this is a book that drops you into a new continent. You have some familiar characters, but almost entirely new ones. He's essentially hit the refresh button on this book in this series. It all ties together. We'll have a few more books that take place on this continent. One more book that takes place on this continent, and then we travel to the other ones. The other continents are dealing with their own books, and they all kind of tie together and they weave together to get this beautiful ending. But we get a lot of the starts of a lot of storylines here, and the continuation essentially of one of them, or maybe two of them. And so to see these stories build up, we've got, and I don't want to spoil anything, but we've got this story that I think is the most iconic of this, which is the Chain of Dogs, which is the story of a military commander that is trying to take a huge horde of refugees from one side of this continent to the other while he's being attacked from the locals that are in an uprising. And this journey that everybody knows will be unsuccessful because the odds are so terribly stacked against this guy, who probably would succeed quite easily if he didn't have these refugees to take care of. But he has this immense honor about him that he knows that this is his job, and he's going to do it, and he's going to do it to the best of his ability. So you get this war chronicle that's written from the viewpoint of Duker or Duker. I don't know exactly how this is pronounced because I don't listen to the audiobooks and don't really hear people talking about them in videos. And he's this military historian who was formerly in the military himself. And so you get this involved in some battles, but also from this oftentimes taking a side seat to kind of watch the battle unfold. But it feels like you're reading like, Vietnam War, memoirs kind of thing. And, this terribly tragic and bloody and sad sequence of chapters that you get to go through, and that culminates into a very powerful ending that I do not want to spoil for you at all. You've got this story that is one of my favorites in all of Malazan, and it's the story of 𝗪𝐿. It's this girl who ends up having to go through the most traumatic of events as a young girl who is a teenager, and that this deep trauma of rape and betrayal of her own family and drug use and to try to cope, and friendships being broken and all this trust being broken, and her trying to find her way in the world and try to survive. And it's one where a lot of people dislike the chapters because she's such an unlikable person. But and maybe I would feel differently if I didn't have a daughter. And I feel like I would probably look at it the same, but I don't know. I can't think of myself as any other person than me. But to have a little girl who's not that age, but when I think of, I can't help but connect her chapters to the feelings of my own little girl, and it makes me love this character so deeply and understand and feel compassion for this broken individual that lashes out against everybody, that is such a dislikable person, but at the same time is so immensely likable because of trying to just see and understand why she is who she is. And those chapters were very special to me, and they've gotten even more special to me on my reread. You know, when I read it the first time, my daughter was a baby, very young, and didn't have the ability to talk yet. And now to have a little girl who can fully express her emotions, and I can connect with and can see herself a lot more in this character than I did before. So it was just a wonderful, wonderful storyline that is, but when I say wonderful, I just mean compelling and tragic. This book is very tragic. This is the most grimdark of all of the Malazan books. I happen to love grimdark, which is one of the reasons that I connected so much with this. And how dislikable I feel like the other characters were in her storyline that I liked quite a bit more the first time around, but I found so detestable the second time around. But then you find this compassion for him and this overwhelming theme that Erikson throws out at you so relentlessly of compassion, and you know how much that resonates with every chapter, and that it's hard to come through, but it nonetheless does, because of the events that all these characters have to go through, and it's special writing. You know, there were some chapters that there were some character arcs that I didn't love as much, that I kind of wanted to kind of get through. You know, these character arcs with 𝐴𝐴𝐵𝐵 and 𝐒𝐻𝐵, where I started off reading them in this book, and it felt like I didn't connect with them as much. But by the end of it, I found myself so more connected with these characters than I ever did, and especially the character of 𝐴𝐵𝐵, who I just adore, and I don't want to ruin anything, but you know, his lifelong mission that he's been tasked with and given himself, and I won't say anything more than that. But I find myself, when I first time I read him, I found myself falling out of love with these characters along, but I can find myself falling more in love with them, almost like an inverse relationship with these characters. And so that was a joy. You know, the storyline with the whirlwind, I found a little dry this time around, but it's not a predominant storyline, but one where you need to know these characters, and it sets things up to go into the future in the book House of Chains, which is a book that I'm so looking forward to reading, because it takes all these storylines and continues on with them to get the conclusion that you're looking for. And the character of 𝐒𝐻𝐵𝐵, who is one of my favorite characters. But I found when I read these that he doesn't really come into his own. It's almost like he changes as a character, not because he undergoes change. He's the same character from the first page to the last. But I almost feel like Erikson writes him a little bit differently in the future books, and I like that character more. This one, he didn't have that, the silliness and the comedic aspect as much. It's like Erikson was trying, but he didn't figure out how to nail this character until later books. And so I'm looking forward to that transformation. But I disliked him even more in this one, because I know what he becomes and my enjoyability of him. And so that was a little harder to get through. And you know, as we go through to the end of this book, where I'm not going to spoil a single thing, but it's one of my favorite endings of any story that I've ever read. And up until the very last pages, which I feel like even the epilogue here is one that I remembered and was looking forward to, and didn't fail to have that emotional punch that Erikson was looking for. And it just brings everything around and makes you feel, doesn't have this, you don't get this sense of dread. And the way he finally closes things out at least gives you some hope for the future, which is important in a book like this, because I feel like hope is another major theme here, even though these horrendous odds that are stacked up against all these characters. I feel like that's what differentiates this series from other traditionally grimdark stories, where there's very little hope, and you kind of know that things are going to go poorly for everybody in the world. Where in this one, even though these horrible events are happening, and truly grotesque and monstrous events, but you kind of know everything's gonna at least have a good conclusion, or a right conclusion, and somehow Erikson rides this line so beautifully, and it's a major skill. So. Yeah, I don't need to keep droning on here about my love for this. I will say that I'm just loving my reread, and I'm so looking forward to continue on with these. makes me feel like I just kind of wish I could power through these. The first time I read these, I read them all 10 back to back, and I was hooked. But that's kind of the style that I read. And so on one hand, it's nice to take these breaks between the books to make me savor them more and look forward to them more. But another, I'm just almost like, man, I kind of just want to pick up, Memories of Ice next. But I kind of can't do it. I have a huge list of books I need to read, and I'll get backed up on the other ones and kind of forget them if I don't. But it's a self-made problem, but it's a good problem to have, because it's just so many books that I want to read and not enough time, which is a great thing, right? I'd rather have it be that than just not be in love with anything and have this horrendous, this stalling out that a lot of people have. And I almost have the opposite problem, where I just kind of wish I had more time to read, and I wish I could read, just pause life and just read all day. And so yeah, great problem to have, and this book is a prime contributing factor to it. So that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Amy, Alex P, Anna G, CJ, Doused, Darren, Daniel O, JD, Jonathan, Josh, Nathan T, Ned's Book Channel, 𝗏𝗏𝗏, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Slay, Tahir, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Joe UK, Kat Mick, Marcus, Michael Sugarman, and Sky. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.